Welcome to the SSAA Victoria podcast, our first one for 2025. Our guest today is SSAA CEO Tom Kenyon. Before we get to Tom, there's a bit of news stuff going on with SSAA Victoria. So we've started the year quite busy in the state office. We've been busy meeting with ministers and shadow ministers. There was a reshuffle of the opposition front bench, and they're very much in the contention for the election next year. So we've spent a fair bit of time making sure that the new shadow ministers who are relevant to us know who we are and what our issues are and are really cognizant of the things that affect shooters and hunters. We had a meeting with the police minister a couple of weeks ago, the CEO and I, just to ensure that everything's on track, that the consultation around shooting issues is going to continue to be really robust and open as we've had it, and using certainly what's going on in Western Australia, which we'll talk about later on in this podcast, as a bit of a salient lesson and an example of what not to do, I suppose. So really good discussions with the police minister. We've been busy in what's now called the outdoor recreation space under the Minister for Outdoor Recreation. The big news in that was the duck season. So 2025 for the first time is a duck season where the season conditions have been set using adaptive harvest management. So rather than the old process, which was let's gather a heap of data from a heap of different places and then stick our thumb in the air and figure out what the politics are, the duck season this year in Victoria is set purely on a scientific model that's got sustainability at its core. And the really good news with that is that it's delivered a really robust bag limit. So it's delivered a bag limit of 9 birds, which is the highest it's been in a number of years. And it shows really great promise for future years, even in drier years, that this model is going to deliver a sustainable bag limit that's really well worth people going out and hunting for. The other big news on that is that the government's locked that in for 3 years, the season length and the season start dates. So that gives members and hunters and workers and families and kids really good opportunity to plan. So you can plan your holidays. If duck opening is a big part of your family tradition, you know when it's going to be for the next 3 years. You can go and plan for it and make sure that you've got the time and keep those traditions really well and truly alive. So that's really important. We've also been pushing for more access to national parks and really ramping that up, particularly for deer hunting. In a number of parks across the state, not just these new ones the government's looking at doing, whether they do them or not, which of course the association opposes the creation of these new parks. But we've been looking at access in existing parks where deer hunting hasn't traditionally been allowed, but where there's no good reason for it not to be. We've got a great deal more deer hunters now and not much more access. So the association's been talking to government about how we can get more deer hunters in. We've been supporting the Victorian hound hunters on their push for a couple of extra breeds of hounds, which is a small issue, but it's important to the people who go and do that. We've also been talking to government about continuing their changes with regulations around the hog deer check-in process. So making sure that what does end up happening there strikes the right balance between making it easy for hunters, but also protecting that really important resource, which is the wild hog deer. The association's got lots of our training programs on offer, and we've been really busy with training this year. The training department's flat out. It's going to be our busiest year ever. Our practical firearm training program, which is a really low cost, effectively subsidised start into shooting that gives people the practical skills they need to be safe and effective with firearms, is selling really well, but it's available on our website. Encourage anyone who's getting into shooting or know someone getting into shooting to go to PFTP. It's a fantastic program. We've also got courses coming into the hunting seasons, so a duck hunting course and a deer hunting course. So again, to help those beginners in those areas be successful, because if you're a successful hunter, you're going to want to go out and do it more. You're going to get more out of your hunting. We've got courses coming up in shotgun shooting, in shooting centerfire rifles, and also our occupational courses. So along with stuff we run for government departments, for zoos, for airports, for any number of corporate sort of clients, there's courses we're running for people who want to get into the pest control industry, government-backed qualifications so that you can get into shooting as an occupation. So we've got all sorts of training courses. Look up the training tab on our website for that. A couple of events coming along. So our really successful Women on Target events continue to roll out through regional Victoria. Next one's in Shepparton on the 22nd of March. So they're completely free, no experience necessary, no shooter's license necessary. It's for women to come and try in a really safe, supported environment. We provide all of the ammunition, all of the expert tuition, provide you with lunch, so check it out on our website for that. Women on Target's a really great initiative that the association really proud to sponsor and try and drive more female participation in the sport. And we've also got our military rifle club's got its state championships coming up at Eagle Park on the 4th to the 6th of April. So that's just a really potted summary of what's been only a couple of months in 2025 so far and a lot more to come. But without further ado, we'll move into talking to today's guest, which is Tom Kenyon.
Thanks, Barry. Thanks for having me.
Been in the job a year or so now?
Well, not quite. Started in July last year. So, yeah, just coming up for a year.
Coming up for a year, and it's been a fair bit going on in that 12 months, which we'll try and touch on.
It's been good. It's been an enjoyable experience, actually. Yeah.
Before we get to what's going on in SSAA National, I suppose you were saying on the way in, we're in Collingwood here, you said your father grew up around these parts?
He did, yeah. Dad was born in Collingwood in 1935, and he always used to joke there was only three things that mattered in Collingwood then. I think it was Collingwood Football Club, the Labor Party, and the Catholic Church, and it didn't really matter what order you placed them in, but as long as you had those three. So that was my father's background.
Probably no church and the Greens Party and craft breweries are the things that matter in Collingwood now.
Yeah, no, it's very dramatically different. Yeah, it was a very poor area when he grew up.
You grew up in South Australia?
I did, yeah. So Dad and Mum moved over to Adelaide because one of the universities over there, Flinders University, was the first university in Australia to offer mature age entry. And Dad was the first one in his family to go to university. So they moved over so he could do that. And I was born while they were over there, and we just ended up staying.
All right, so you went through school in Adelaide?
Yeah. So I grew up in Adelaide. I was born over there. Moved around a bit in primary school, but then moved up into the hills, in the Adelaide Hills, and sort of got a bit stable there, and went to St Ignatius College, which is a Jesuit school in Adelaide, and was there from the rest of last bit of primary school and then through high school. So that was good. And that's in the hills is where I learnt to shoot. That's we lived on a sort of 100 acres up in the hills, and a friend of my dad's lent him an air rifle, and Dad sort of put it in a cupboard and didn't really think about it, and I found it, and it's like, well, fine, I'll go and use that. So I used to wander around, and that's how I just learned to shoot, by shooting out the back with an air rifle with iron sights.
So being a shooter from a young age?
Yeah, I reckon I must have been about 10 when I found that rifle, yeah. So that was good. It was one of the best things I've found.
For the days, well, you can't even get I think you've got to be attached to a club or something to get a junior permit in South Australia.
We don't have junior permits in South Australia, no. So you can, we're sort of fairly relaxed about it. As long as you're in the company of a licensed adult, there's no real restrictions on being able to shoot. You just got to be supervised by a licensed adult. So that's not too bad. My younger son, he had a couple of gel blasters. They're the only thing that would keep him out of playing video games. He'd go outside with his mates and play gel blasters. They banned them, and there are a couple of shops in Adelaide that were selling gel blasters. They all shut down overnight. There was no notice or consultation or anything like that. Anyway, that was an opportune time to introduce junior licenses and get the kids out there, perhaps learning firearm safety in a proper formalised way, and then letting them go and have some fun outside. But they didn't take that. So
yeah, it seems like a missed opportunity. We've got, certainly at Springvale, we've got a youth training scheme.
Yeah, right.
That runs kids through the discipline of handling and using firearms, and those kids are walking away from there really good shooters, but really safe shooters.
Yeah.
It first came to my attention, the South Australian thing. On Sunday Island, we run a junior ballot,
right,
where kids can enter and get the chance to have a guided hog deer hunt.
Oh.
And, of course, we have to exclude kids from South Australia because part of our conditions are that we've got to cite a shooter's licence in order for them to come and hunt, and we can't cite a shooter's licence because they haven't got one. So
yeah, okay, that makes sense. That's a shame, actually. All right, that's something for the South Australian branch to work on maybe, and I might talk to them about that.
But yeah, I mean, it probably doesn't affect a great deal of kids, but I know kids who have missed out because of that, which is a real shame.
Yeah, but it's also one of those things, like if you've got depending on the conditions around the junior licence, you might have farmers' kids, for instance, with a junior's licence might be able to go and wander around the property and, look after rabbits or whatever else it is. And I'm not sure exactly what the conditions are in other states, but it could free things up like that,
Yeah, and there's interstate competitions. I know.
Yeah, right.
There were some kids from SSAA Victoria went and shot in Tasmania last year, so I'm assuming all of that's pretty unavailable to kids from South Australia.
True. All right, well, I'll check it out.
Yeah, I'm not trying to load up the South Australian.
I didn't realise that it was that sort of complicated though. Because although there's the National Firearms Agreement, it doesn't, and everything's sort of roughly the same. There's always these little things that are from state to state that differ. So that's obviously one of them.
If James or David happen to be listening to this, I'm sorry, guys. I wasn't
didn't mean to dob you in.
Didn't mean to dob you in.
But anyway, we'll see what we can do.
Yeah, it's just interesting. So after secondary school,
my first job out of school was working on a cattle station in Queensland. So I worked as a jackaroo up in St George, which is about 800 k's west of Brisbane. Friends of mine owned that station, and I just went and started working up there, and I sort of took this gap year and wandered around, and then went to uni, did an arts degree, wandered around a little bit more.
An arts degree being what you do when you don't know
when you don't really know what degree you want to do. That's right. It was like it's funny enough because I sort of wandered around for a few more years and then did an environmental management degree. But the arts degree was more academically rigorous than the environmental management degree, even though that was an applied science and you'd think it would be tougher. It was the way they set it up was a lot of modules, and they were sort of first and second year standard, but they never really graduated up to that third year level of toughness, I didn't think anyway. But so it was a strange observation to make for a arts graduate to be thinking the arts degree was harder. So there you go. I got interested in the Labor Party seriously about that time. And I started working for a union, the Shop Assistants Union. From there, went to work for a senator, and from there went to I worked for our state treasurer when we formed government in 2002, the Labor Party. 4 years of that, and then got elected to state parliament in 2006. And I was there for 12 years. Was a minister for a little while, including Minister for Sport and Recreation. And then finished up Parliament in 2018. I lost my seat, and I had an unhappy interaction with democracy at that point. And then I've sort of been working a few jobs here and there. I was working for a company that commercialised university research, which I enjoyed. I was working for a cybersecurity company, and then I saw the ad for the Sporting Shooters Association, and I thought that would be fantastic. So I've always loved shooting. I've always really enjoyed it. I've had my licence for quite a long time. Been shooting for longer, and I thought, oh, it's an important thing in my life. Like, I really enjoy it. I want my kids to still be able to enjoy it, and shooting is under threat. Like, if I think the pressure is on further restrictions. It's not opening up. So over time, it's going to get harder and harder unless we're very vigilant. And I wanted to be part of that. I wanted to be able to protect the sport for my kids and for everybody else who just enjoys doing it.
So the right job came along at the right time?
Correct. Yeah, it really did, actually. It was very it worked. It was surprisingly good. The whole process was very smooth. And it was, as you say, it was exactly the right time in my life for that to happen. So I was really pumped to get the job.
So you're with SSAA National, or what you probably just call SSAA in the national office? Or?
Yeah, I just say the Sporting Shooters Association because, you get into the state and federal, the state and national arrangements then.
Which probably isn't of much interest to the outside world, but our members listening, a lot of them probably don't quite understand
how it works,
how the association's structured.
Yeah. So the states are actually the bodies that deliver most of the services, as you'd know. So the states own the ranges or facilitate the clubs that own the ranges. The states, if you're a member of the SSAA, you're actually a member of your state branch, or your state association. So everyone in Victoria who's a member is a member of SSAA Victoria, and then SSAA Victoria is a member of SSAA Incorporated or National. And so there's that removal, and the national office is essentially a service body to the state offices. So we provide the membership services. So when our members go onto the website to join up, they're actually, that service is being provided by the national office. It's done nationwide, except in Queensland they look after their own membership, but it's done pretty much nationwide. We print the magazines and provide them around the country, and we also provide insurance services for our members. So one of the most important aspects of SSAA membership for a lot of our members is the fact that you've got public liability insurance of $20 million for all shooting activities, or legal shooting activities, I should say. But so, if you're shooting legally, you're covered by SSAA insurance. Yeah.
And members also get access to pretty sharp deals on firearm insurance. So.
Correct, yes. So we've got our own arrangements for firearm protection. So if your firearm is stolen, I think it's $35 for $25,000 of cover, which is pretty good. And that'll cover most people's firearms. You can buy extra cover if you want it, but that means that if if your firearms are damaged in an accident, if they're stolen, if you lose them somehow, they're covered. So that's another really important service.
And it's become that's a standalone business.
It is. Yeah, the insurance broker and we call it the insurance mutual, which is the firearms protection. That's probably just over half of our members. Our members have the mutual insurance, the firearms protection. Everyone's covered by the public liability and accident. We have accident cover for our members, as well as income protection insurance for our members. Everyone's automatically covered by that, and we buy those services through our broker, but they also provide services for members and members of the public. Actually, if you want particularly business insurance and things like that, they're able to source it for you. So if you're interested in getting a good quote for business insurance or something like that, give the SSAA insurance a ring.
Yeah, another association I'm involved in have just taken up a policy through SSAA.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, really good.
Oh, very good to deal with. This is not a plug, but yeah, they're great to deal with. Sharp pricing. Found us a good deal. And
brilliant. Yeah, well, that's good. I'm really pleased that's true. Yeah.
So yeah, and that's what I've heard from various shooting clubs. So there's a lot of shooting clubs I know that are not SSAA that are using SSAA to source their insurance.
Yeah, well, that's great. That's really good. And that we have a commitment to the broader shooting industry, or a movement as well. It's not just all about the SSAA. So the fact that other clubs are using it is fantastic.
Right. So there's the other thing I've noticed, certainly noticed myself as a SSAA member, even in recent weeks, has been a marked uplift in communication coming in. So I think it's every Wednesday and every Sunday now I'm getting an email in my inbox.
Yeah, we decided late last year that we were sending out just under one email a week on average, but it was sort of haphazard. Like it just depended on when the magazine was out, or something came up or whatever it was. So we've decided to structure that in a way that is predictable, and that's 2 a week. We think we're trying not to harass people, but we think people will put up with 2 a week, and there's a lot of content. The other thing is, because we have now a digital copy of the magazine, it's often the case that people will see the link to the magazine come out at the start of the month, but they might not have time to read it on the spot, and then it's sort of forget about it or whatever else. So the point of these more regular emails is to start including stories from that month's magazine in the emails as well. So there's always constant feed of content and our stories going out there, because we put a lot of time and effort into producing the magazine and the content for the magazine. So this is a way for us to making sure that it gets read by our members, that and it's as accessible to them as they need it to be.
Which is quite a magazines. I love magazines, or maybe I'm just old school.
Yeah, I'm the same. Yeah, that's right.
But at the end of the day, they're just a conduit for content. So.
Correct. Yeah, that's right. And the Australian Shooter magazine really started as sort of the journal. In fact, it was called Australian Shooters Journal, and it was the newsletter of the association, and it went out I think monthly. It's been going monthly for a long time, and so it's really just been a communication, internally in many ways. But it's sort of developed into something more than that. It's an entertainment piece and everything else. And we're trying to take that further now. So we're creating all of this content. And you and I think we're roughly the same age. And you're right, I'm the same as you at least. I like magazines. Like I grew up with car magazines and surfing magazines and skiing magazines, all those things. And I really enjoy them. But a lot of people don't anymore. The magazines are slowly dying. And the ones that survive are specialty magazines, like the niche productions like we have. So the Hunter and Australian Shooter. You look at Wheels magazine, probably one of the more successful car magazines. That's still alive and going and seems pretty healthy. So there's this move, while there's a big move to digital products and platforms, there's still interest in magazines. And I sort of hope magazines get a bit of a revival like vinyl, where, kids are getting back into it. And my son, he's 25 and he's sort of discovered film cameras and he's into them. So I'm sort of hoping, magazines become a bit the same. People get back into magazines. But in the meantime, we have to provide a more digital content for those people that want it so they can read it on the go. So you also accompanying our digital magazine and the emails, the uptick in emails, you're also going to start to see some video reviews. So when we have our writers reviewing a rifle, we'll try and get some video of them doing that and get their thoughts on camera as well as in writing. So, and the idea will be, that you get a small little reel, for the TikTok reel, or I don't even know the terminology because I don't even have half of these accounts. But you have your reel type, less than 60 seconds, and that'll be, we're reviewing a, Tikka T3X or whatever it is. And then we'll have a longer 3 or 4 minute sort of summary of the review, which is, these were the good points, these were the bad points. Here's what it looks like. There was this tricky little thing with the magazine and this is what that was. And the full reviews, in the magazine, this month's Shooter Journal, which you get by being a member. And the idea is each thing points to everything else so that people are seeing things on different platforms all the time.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, so that's sort of the goal. There'll probably be some new websites. I think we'll set up a separate website for Australian Hunter, and then we'll probably go down the path of a separate website for Australian Shooter as well. Just again to broaden the offering of the magazines, provide advertisers with an opportunity to interact more directly with the people who are interested in their products, but really just to get things out into a broader audience, which I think as we're out there trying to get more young people into the sport, we've got to facilitate our communication in a way that gets to them, and they want to hear.
Got to reach them on their terms.
Yeah, correct.
They're
That's
not
right.
walking into a news agent and
and we don't get to demand how they talk to us.
Yeah.
When we're trying to talk to them in the first place.
Yeah, that's all quite logical.
Yeah, it is. It's hard. I am not a very digital person, so it brings its challenges, but we'll get there.
You've got some smart young people in the office.
I do. Yeah, I've got some great guys, and I work in the office. They're really good, and we're just starting to ramp all that up now.
And there's going to be some changes to Australian Shooter as well.
Yeah, we're just going to refresh the look of it a little bit, just to make it. Every now and then, magazines refresh their sort of style, and we'll be doing that, and that'll come out in July. And then from July on, we'll be doing some. We're calling them focus and specials. So later in the year, we'll do a lefty special because I'm a left-handed freak in terms of shooting. I'm actually right-handed, but left-eye dominant, so I shoot left-handed. And last year or two, I've been looking for left-handed rifles, and it's hard to find. The manufacturers don't necessarily advertise that they make a left-handed or right-handed. It's becoming more common, but they haven't for a while. Nye are actually very good. If you look in their, they have this big thick magazine of all their products, and they highlight what ones are available in left-handed, which
like a sinister section, have they? Or?
Yeah. So they've got the weirdo section down the back. No, they have it. They have it just, they have the whatever it is, a hunting rifle, and they'll have a breakout down the bottom that just says, these calibers are available in left hand and this model and stuff like that. So my copy of that brochure is highlighted with the tags. But anyway, in an effort to sort of highlight what's available in the industry, because there's a surprising number of left-handed rifles out there, we're going to do a left-handed special later in the year, and we'll just get a couple of our reviewers will come to Adelaide. We'll go out to a range. We'll play around with all of the different rifles, and we'll do some video and we'll shoot it all, and we'll shoot the rifles and we'll write it up, and so that'll be a big sort of thing. Otherwise, from month to month, you'll see it'll be a focus. We might do 16 pages on binoculars, or 16 pages on spotting scopes or long range precision rifles or something like that. So. We'll just start to be a little bit more concentrated and targeted and a little more structured in the content that we're putting in there. But the big change will be, along with the style, it will be adding the sort of the add-ons of the video through YouTube and the reels. Yeah.
Oh, it's an interesting time for print and for all that communication.
It really is. I think the really difficult thing for printers, like producers of magazines and things like that, because generally people who make the magazines, they're so passionate about magazines and everything else. Moving away from them, or augmenting them rather than moving away from them to keep the magazine relevant, has actually been really difficult, and so many of them haven't survived. Like I used to, there used to be 3 or 4 different surf magazines that I bought, and none of them are available anymore. So it's like. Everyone's just made that transition very quickly to the digital, which I suppose in some ways suits them because they're action sports, the waves and the surfing and everything else. But I think shooting still lends itself to a print content, as long as you pair that with some digital offering,
something a bit more dynamic.
Yeah, that's right.
And more broadly, I suppose it's a pretty open question. Where's SSAA National? Any other changes more broadly with the association?
There'd probably be a change in focus than anything else. We're a member organisation. We're driven by membership. So part of my goals are to increase the number of people who have a firearms licence around the country, and then to increase the percentage of people that have a firearms licence who are members of the SSAA. Ideally, I'd like 100% of shooters to be in the SSAA. I think that's a bit ambitious, but the value for money offered by SSAA membership is so great that I think we can get more people involved. Even if you're buying your membership just for the insurance, the public liability insurance, you wouldn't get that price, $100. You wouldn't get that if you went out and sourced your own public liability insurance. And it's $20 million. It's generous, and things can go wrong, and for some people, unfortunately, they have gone wrong in the past, and they were covered by their insurance, and that's been a godsend to them. I imagine it would be easy to accidentally do some damage to either property or animals or people that you weren't supposed to, and the consequences, the financial consequences of that, can be quite steep, and to be covered by that insurance, I think, is a great comfort. That was actually one of the things that attracted me to membership in the end. Yeah. So.
Yeah, the potential liability for an individual would break most individuals. So.
That's right. Yeah, correct. And even though it's probably one of the safest sports in the country, actually, shooting. Like I looked at some statistics, and I think the target sports, which include archery as well as and things like that, are the safest sports in Australia. So the lowest amount of injuries, if you compare that to the contact sports like rugby and football and those things, even netball has a tremendous rate of knee damage, and that's not a contact sport. Or officially, it's not a contact sport. It can get pretty rough when I watch my daughter play, but the rate of injury in those sports is so much greater than shooting, or the shooting by a long way. And so it's a very, very safe sport, but in human activities, things go wrong, and when they do, our members are covered.
Comforting to know.
That's correct, yeah.
Politically, SSAA's had mixed reviews over the years as an effective voice for shooters, and look, a lot of that's undeserved. It's easy for people outside the arena to throw stones.
Yeah. the SSAA is, just sort of looking at its history and talking to people around, it's been an effective advocate for shooters, but it has also sort of hidden its light, under a bushel, as it were, that it hasn't been good at telling its members the work that it's done on their behalf. And I would like to improve that. So I know, I was in New South Wales last week, and I went with the state CEO in New South Wales to meet with the two members of the sporting shooters. Was it the Shooters, Farmers and Fishers Party in New South Wales? And we had the meeting. It was very productive. It was a good meeting. One of the things we resolved in that was we need to be more open about the meetings that we're having, the lobbying that we're doing on behalf of members, so that, when you mentioned a whole bunch of meetings that you've been doing since the start of the year, just because of the changeover in the opposition, and you continued. I think it must have been around duck shooting, and your continued engagement with the government. We need to let people know we've been doing that. We need to get that out there. And one of the things I'd like to do in the national office is make sure that the magazine and our YouTube channels and Facebook channels and everything are all available for the states to put that content through, so that we can share it and let people know what we are doing. Because we do good work, we're effective. Can we improve? Of course. Every organisation can improve. But we've done a lot more than our members are aware of, and I want to start getting that out there. So I'm looking forward to that, because my background is politics, as you know. So I'm quite comfortable with it, and I think maybe the organisation in the past has concentrated more on just providing services for its members. I'm of the opinion, and I think that there's a danger that Western Australia becomes the sort of the benchmark, and everyone tries to go and do what Western Australia's done. It's tremendously impractical what's happened over there. The changes they've made don't really make very much sense at all. It's just been a chest-beating exercise from the police minister over there, Papalia. And, the net result will be zero increase in safety, but just a lot harder for lawful firearms owners to go about doing what they want to do. And the danger is that becomes commonplace around Australia, and our job is to prevent that, or to do as much as we can to prevent it. And I think that means that our members, the members of the SSAA, need to get more political as well, in terms that, and doesn't mean they need to spend all their time, reading the papers and joining parliamentary parties or anything else like that. Well, what they do need to do is pay attention to how they vote, so that they take account their sport when they decide how they vote. And if you know that Party A will, Party A will make it harder for you to shoot, and you still vote for them anyway, well, you can't really complain when they go and do what they said they would do. So we've got to be very clear about who we're voting for and why. And one of the reasons that the NRA has been so successful in the US is because their members are very careful to take firearms ownership into account when they vote. And that includes in the primaries. Now, we don't have that primary system here in Australia, but we do have a preferential system, and we can manage our vote to make sure we put people who are hostile to us last.
And part of that attitude, I suppose, comes back to our members being better informed about what we're doing in the political space.
And that for us, that's our challenge, right? Is to make sure we provide that information. But in the end, if we don't, as voters, as shooters, if we don't change our behaviour about how we vote, then the parties won't change their behaviour about how they treat shooting. Right? So I always say this to people, that politicians really only care about two things, and that's votes and money. And the only reason they care about money is because it helps them win votes, right? So, and votes are what get them there. It's what keeps them there. And so if you are prepared to change your vote, that's incredibly powerful. And not many people need to change their vote. In a marginal seat, a few hundred people can change a seat. And I would like to see, at the moment, shooters make up about 3.5% of the population of Australia. It would be good if we could get that up to about 5%, and the reason I say 5% is because a marginal seat is defined as a seat that needs 5% or less of a swing to lose. So 5% of the population needs to change their mind to change the seat. And if you've got 5% of the population in any given marginal seat is shooters, and shooters decide that they are not going to support one candidate anymore, and they're going to shoot and they're going to support another candidate, you change the seat, right? And that, if enough people do that, you change government. And then when they know that will happen, parties pay attention, and they pay a lot of attention. So it's really one of the challenges for us as shooters is to unlock ourselves from a political party. I mean, that's already underway in Australia. People are leaving the major parties. But we really got to say to people, you got to just unlock. Just because you voted Labor all your life doesn't mean you should vote Labor this time. And just because you voted Liberal all your life doesn't mean you should vote Liberal this time either. We've got to take it case by case basis, candidate by candidate basis, and make up our minds on that. Because otherwise, if we don't do that, if we don't do something different, things will keep going the same way and we'll end up losing.
Which, like you said, is already happening in society anyway with that.
Yeah.
I was watching John Howard on a podcast, actually.
Yeah, right.
There were shooters cringing at the name, but I was a podcast John Howard did with John Anderson. I was watching that, and he was saying in his time it was sort of 40-40-20 amongst the major parties, and now it's more 30-40. So
yeah, that's right.
40% of the population, the biggest group in the population, isn't aligned to either political party.
Yeah, that's correct, and that hasn't stopped yet. It hasn't stabilised. So you're getting this trend, and everyone has a theory about it, and I've got mine, but that's good for us or bad, depending on how we use it. And but if we one thing it does mean is if there's all these independents and minor parties floating around, it gives us the opportunity to work with people in the parliament who are not as locked in as some of the members of major parties might be. So so that can work for us if we're smart about it. But it also makes the job a lot harder. One of the good things about major parties is once you get them into a position, they're locked in, right? So when you're dealing with 100 independents or however many it is, it's herding cats.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and so it makes the state branches' jobs a lot harder. Yeah, absolutely.
And circling back to your point about us being more transparent with our members about what we're doing, I suppose that's just a hangover from the past and a way of doing things. It's increasingly you're less able to do it anyway because
Correct.
Ministers publish their diaries. The public does know who's meeting with who.
Yeah, if they want to look.
And there's no need to the extent that we are the gun lobby, there's no need for us to work in the shadows. We're not doing anything wrong.
No, correct. We're a legitimate lobby group, right? And we're not. And mostly, the funny thing is we're not actually asking for anything. We ask for things. You went through some of the things in your intro about what we are asking for, but it's relatively straightforward, right? Access to national parks. That's not really hard to do. And they've already done it in some parks in Victoria and even in South Australia now. We're just starting to get some access. It's very structured, but we do have some. New South Wales, I think there's might not be national parks, but certainly state forests you're allowed to shoot. And various states all have various access arrangements. But that's not expensive. It's cheap for governments to do that sort of thing. But mostly what we're asking for is just leave us alone. We think the current arrangements are relatively fair. Like they let us do what we want to do as shooters and go about, enjoying our sport, and they protect the public safety. And that's good. That's a good compromise, and there's no reason to change it, in any meaningful way.
Yeah, and look, there'll always be tweaks to
Correct.
laws, and what we've, for the most part, what we've had in Victoria in recent years is pretty good consultation with the government on that. So again, we're not saying don't change the laws, but talk to the people who know what they're talking about when you're doing it.
At least talk to us first. And we're not unreasonable people. We're not going to kick down doors or do anything like that, but. Yeah, and you're right. There could be some tweaks. I think over time we'll see. I'm actually optimistic about this, but I think there'll be some pressure to allow greater access to moderators, sound moderators, and I think the reason for that will be mainly for the convenience of other park users or neighbours or whatever else, so that you don't have to have this loud bang all the time every time we shoot a rabbit or shoot a fox. So I think I think it will take a long time, but we might get some traction on that. There'll be, we might free up some of the processes and the internal processes inside the various licensing branches around the country. But in terms of, I don't think anyone's really calling for widespread adoption of semi-automatics again or anything like that. So, my view on it is we can make those tweaks. You're absolutely right. And then really just let us go about let us enjoy our sport without, that's all we want.
Sounds pretty straightforward and reasonable. Which
You'd think so.
leads us back to Western Australia, I suppose.
Yeah, right.
What exactly has happened?
So Western Australia, they had some very, very significant changes to their legislation around how many firearms you could own, who could own them, the reason for owning them. For instance, you had to get a hunting as an allowed use of your license. You had to have a letter from a landowner who said you could shoot on their property. But the landowners are now only allowed to give 20 of those letters. So, things like that, the police now come around. If you're a farmer and you have a farm, the police are now supposed to come to your property and tell you what calibers you're allowed to use for the relevant pests that are, on your property, and which is just ridiculous. It means you're going to have police tied up traveling all over the state, and Western Australia is the biggest state in the country. It's a third of the nation. And they're going to be driving all over the place, talking to farmers about what they can use on their land. It's so overly bureaucratic and onerous. It's got ridiculous. They've changed the requirements for safes so that if you're a new firearms owner, you need to get a particular type of safe. If you're a current firearms owner, you're grandfathered, but only until you change something. So as soon as you get a new rifle or, a new firearm, then you have to get an upgraded safe. And they're hundreds of dollars extra. Like, they're being specially made for Western Australia because no one else needs safes like that.
So we recently changed safe storage in Victoria a couple of years ago. And that went through the Firearm Consultative Committee, but the standard they arrived at was commercially available. You can buy a compliant safe at Bunnings in Victoria.
Yeah.
Now, that will stop the opportunist crook from getting into your firearms.
Yeah.
But it was also a standard that we could live with. It was people can afford to buy them.
Yep.
It was sensible. We didn't want firearms getting stolen from rural properties, and we were able to work with government to come to a common sense approach.
Yeah, a common approach. You don't want your kids getting into your firearms either. That's the other thing. Like, for me, that was the biggest single thing about having a safe, was it meant that kids couldn't get to the firearms.
But in WA, they seem to have gone
beyond
that.
That's exactly right. They've just gone too far. And I think they've just done it for the sake of doing it. And there's no evidence that anything that needed to be done. Right? And there is some suggestion, and again, this is a suggestion. I don't know if this is true. There's a coroner's report that's outstanding on the matter of that shooting that sort of precipitated these changes, where a guy a man in the Western Australia had a collector's license, was looking for his wife and daughter, I think, went around to one of his wife's friends, shot the friend and the friend's daughter, and then I think ended up shooting himself as well. Now, there's some questions about whether the police knew about that or not, and whether they acted appropriately or not. And if it comes out in the coroner's report that they didn't, we've gone through this whole legislative change, to make Minister Papalia and the Premier feel great about themselves and try and win some points for no reason, when it's not even lawful firearm owners weren't even the problem in the first place. So they rushed it. There were knee-jerk changes. There was no evidence any of them were needed, and Western Australian shooters are the worst for it.
And there was a template in WA, a fairly recent. The Law Reform Commission over there did some work 4 or 5 years ago, I'm going to say, and came up with a raft of potential changes for Western Australia, which is not what has been implemented by the current
that's
government.
right. They went way, way past that. Yeah, it was pretty random. And I don't know where it came from. Whether it might have been the police pushing for it, and it's like, oh, have we got a deal for you, or whether it was the minister himself. I think I got a good, I wouldn't be surprised if it was the government itself, the minister and the premier pushing those changes internally.
Which leads us to where's it going in WA? I suppose we don't often get questions at SSAA Victoria about what are you guys doing in WA, but we have had on this issue.
Yeah, on this issue, because I think, because they're so draconian, the changes. The states, we were talking earlier about the structure of the organisation. The states are leading the charge in their own respective states. And in this case, it's Paul Fitzgerald, who's the president of the Western Australian Association. And so he's leading that. The national office has been assisting him where we can. So, I talk with Fitz quite a bit. I'm providing advice where I can, help where I can. But they have made the decision that the only party that really stood up to work with shooters and to work against these legislative changes was the National Party. And so the Western Australian Association has made the decision to really back the National Party very strongly in Western Australia, and is encouraging all of the Western Australian members of the SSAA to vote for the National Party and to assist them if they can. So not only vote for them, but go out and work on a booth for a couple of hours on polling day or in the pre-poll. So you'd be surprised probably that up to 10% of people make up their mind about who they're going to vote for as they're walking into the polling booth. And so that's why I know people get outraged at people handing out how to vote cards at the polling booth. But that's because 1 in 10 people that walk past them haven't made up their mind yet, and having someone on the booth makes a difference. So we're asking members of the Western Australian sporting shooters to volunteer some of their time for a political party. So there's the Nationals in the lower house, also in the upper house over there, but then there's the Liberal Party who are okay. They're not as good as the Nats. And then there's some upper house parties like the Shooters, Farmers and Fishers Party in Western Australia. There's the Australian Christians over there. The One Nation have been good as well. So those parties are friendly to us. And, if you don't want to support the Nationals, well, then have a think about how you can support these other guys. But definitely, those 5 parties are much more friendly to us, and you should preference those people ahead of anywhere else in your voting. And it comes back to this thing. It doesn't matter if, you might have been voting Labor all your life. Ever since you were 18 and you first voted, you might have voted Labor. We're asking you now to change that behaviour because the Labor Party has made life harder for you in terms of your shooting sport. And we're asking you to take your shooting sport into account when you vote.
And that's not a one-size-fits-all position. That's this is what's happening in Western Australia and the appraisal of what the best thing to do in Western Australia at the moment is.
That's correct. And in Victoria, that will be different. In New South Wales, that will be different. In Queensland and South Australia, everywhere else, that's going to be different. I mean, in New South Wales, I think the current government is very friendly. I don't think you've had too many problems here from the current government in Victoria.
They took us to the brink on duck hunting.
Oh, that's true. I forgot about. I think it was this. Was it the CFMEU that came in?
The ETU.
ETU. That's right. It was the ETU.
A change of premier was probably the most advantageous thing that happened for us there.
I think a lot of people were saying that.
I think if he had have come back from those September holidays, we'd have been in trouble.
Yeah. Right.
But we weren't. So things can change
very quickly.
Very quickly.
Yeah, right.
And in WA. The election's next month, I think. It's pretty soon.
In March, yeah. It's I can't remember if it's the 8th or 9th, the 8th of March or something like that. But it is very soon.
The reality is that Labor will most likely be returned in WA.
Yeah, there's a good chance. You have to, because their majority was so big. I remember McGowan had his election very early on in COVID, and he basically shut Western Australia off from the entire world.
The joke was that the opposition would be able to come to Parliament in a Tarago.
I think it was less than a Tarago, probably in a sedan. It was like they got hammered. They got very viciously hammered, and I mean, I think the Liberal Party leader basically gave up 2 weeks out, but they lost so many seats. So I mean, the Labor Party is going to lose a lot of seats, but will it be enough? Probably. It's hard to say. It would be quite remarkable if. If they came back from here to win government, the Nationals and the Libs, they would have done incredibly well. But I think you've got to remember that Albanese is very unpopular at the moment. That's probably going to weigh down on the Labor Party vote. Lots of little groups are annoyed with Labor at the moment. That may have an effect if people change their votes. That's why it's so important for shooters to really consider who they're voting for. Anything can happen in elections. This is the amazing thing. In Queensland, I think Campbell Newman won with a massive, massive majority. And you're right. There was the Tarago applied there for the Labor Party. And then they won 4 years later. They won government. Like out of, I think that's a 89 seat parliament in Queensland, and they won 80 seats or some ridiculous, not that many seats, but they were so far down, and they won a huge number of seats to be a dominant government. And so you can't rule it out, especially at state politics. Much more volatile. State politics are much more volatile than federal parliament. And
the reality is that even if you do not change the government, you can still send a very strong message to
Correct. Yeah, that's right. And you get them within 1 or 2 seats, and everything changes, right? Because when you're 1 or 2 seats away, you just need one person to spit the chew in, become an independent. You need, someone to get sick and die. I mean, God forbid that would happen, but it's a lot more tenuous when you've got a 1 or 2 seat majority than if you've got a 30 seat majority. So, yeah, a big push back might chasten them a little bit, and I hope it does because their behaviour's been outrageous.
Yeah. And I look at campaigns when we do campaigns, successful or unsuccessful, and say what are the lessons learned. And I'm sure there's some lessons that can be learned from what's happened in history in WA. But I was thinking about it driving in today. Sometimes there are no lessons too. Sometimes it's just, hey, a government came out of COVID, won a thumping majority, did what they wanted to do, and there was really nothing you could have done that would have gotten their way.
No, that's true. But I suppose the lesson there is, that we're not to get caught up in the hype when an election comes around. Like it was such an unusual circumstance. But did everyone really need to vote Labor? Like at the last election. I don't know. I mean, who knows? Every election is discrete. Everybody votes according to their best interest. In that point, I mean, the Premier was very popular at the time, Premier McGowan. Everyone thought he was doing the right thing, and I suppose they just wanted to support him to keep doing the right thing while COVID was on. So, I mean, you can never blame voters for the result. You because it's just what it is, right?
Well, the voter's always right, aren't they?
That's right. So but the lesson there, I suppose, is don't give government such massive majorities. You can't really control that. But so I suppose in the end, you're right. If they then use that majority badly, then sometimes it's just out of the blue and you can't fix it.
Yeah, and I'm not to late, but there didn't seem to be any great warning signs. They didn't go to the election saying we're going to punish shooters.
No, that's right. And look, who knows what would have happened had that shooting not occurred? Of that woman and her daughter. Had that not happened, who knows what would have happened? Whether they might just have stuck with the Law Reform Commission recommendations. Maybe they might have done nothing. You don't know. You just don't know.
All right. Well, that brings us sort of the end of what I've got on my list. Tom, was there anything else you wanted to discuss or give a plug to?
No. I suppose it's a good chance for me to say thank you to all of our volunteers right throughout the organisation, right around the country, especially here in Victoria, the range officers who volunteer their time, all the people in clubs who volunteer their time to keep the clubs ticking over, and then the state office that works really hard to deliver services to the Victorian members. Just thank you all for the work that you do and the way you assist our sport. I'd urge you all to take out firearms protection to buy the money because it's just a really good value insurance product. And I'm not allowed to call it an insurance product. It's not technically an insurance product, but it's a great product to protect your firearms. And I just wish everybody well with their sport and with the shooting, and good luck.
Well, thanks, Tom. Thanks for coming on your first podcast. I hope it wasn't too painful.
No, it was great. Thank you. I enjoyed it.
Cheers.